Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in with me again. Of course, I'm Ian Torch. This is the Hot Seat, and have we got one for you today? I am calling the head office of Homebrewed Comics right now, and I'm about to sit down with probably the next Stan. Who knows? If you would please introduce yourself to the adoring masses.
My name is Christopher Michael. I am the writer, creator, and artist for C.R.I.T, a comic based on a Dungeons & Dragons game that we created last year.
Very cool. Okay, so what, is C.R.I.T like Champions or Heroes Unlimited?
No, it is. Well, the name came from, if you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons, when you roll a natural 20 on the die, it's called a crit, a critical hit. And I wanted my team to be named that. So they're Covert Reconnaissance Infiltration Team. They're not very covert. Cool. They like to make a lot of noise, but it was a cool name. And we started off really as a basic game, and I realized it was kind of crazy and became a lot of fun. So I started drawing it, and it kind of evolved over the course of a year and a half into something really cool and a little bit more than, honestly, I expected to begin with.
Very cool. And like a lot of developers right now, you do a lot of indie funding. Where are you right now with this? What is it, a graphic novel or just an issue? Like, where are we?
It's an issue. We are on issue 2. I have currently 12 issues written. We have a plan for 36 issues, which it might grow a little bit, but that's the overall plan is 36. So right now we are on issue 2. Issue 1 we self-funded, and we just sold 100 copies of that one. Just this past week, shipped out our 100th copy. On issue 2 right now, we're on Kickstarter, funded in 24 hours. I think as of right now, we have 37 backers, and we have a total of 81 books sold on Kickstarter right now. We're almost 3 times the goal that we had, so that's really cool.
Well, what was the original goal, or can you legally talk about that?
Oh, I can talk about it. My goal is $500. It really only cost me $500 to make the book. I do 90% of the art myself. I have another gentleman who comes in behind me. Oh, cool! I just found the gecko that we were talking about. She was in a notebook. Sorry. Previous to our conversation, I have a leaf gecko who got loose and hid in one of my work notebooks. Actually, the notebook that has all of our funding and budget stuff. It's almost like she wanted to go to work with me today.
Oh, wow.
So that is really cool.
Take your gecko to work.
Her name is Trico. My daughter named her. And I usually have her out when I'm drawing because she just kind of like hangs out of my hand while I draw. And today she decided that she wanted to venture out. So apologize for the disruption there, but I was worried about her. She was my Father's Day gift this year. But,
well then.
Yes. So very, very cool that I found her. We were a little bit worried. But this is the longest she's been out. She's very happy. Her colors are very bright right now. So back to the budget and stuff. So the base budget was $500 because that's really all it cost me to have a secondary colorist come in and do details and shading for me. I have a guy, Cristiano Cruz, who's part of our team, and it's not very important for right now for me to make any money, but this is his job is coloring comic books. That's all he does. So I want to make sure we take care of him. The rest of it, is going to go back into the company to provide more books because I don't want to go to Kickstarter for every single book. I'm hoping that what we've made off this one will fund at least one more. I've got, like I said, 80 books sold right now, and we're in talks with 2 retailers. We just hit 5 different stores in North Carolina, and I'm trying to branch out from that.
Very cool. Well, what's what's the basic plot of Crit to really since you said that there's a clear storyline, you're looking to hit 36 issues. So clearly there's a
Hmm.
point A, a point B, and a point C. So what is the world of Crit like?
So let me pull this up because recently I had one of my guys kind of write this up for me because the the main plot, the underlying thing was really just to get a bunch of friends back together. So I wanted to create a kind of a superhero story of sorts to tell. Very basic, nothing. The idea in the beginning was just something with five, four or five heroes running around the city stopping crime. That was your our base story, and it evolved. So what I have written is Crit is a superhero comic. It's based on a tabletop game created by homebrewed heroes. It's an action adventure title that centers on a group of friends that gain superpowers after an accident at work. Their employer, Technetic, which is a very large company in our universe, learns of their powers and sends them out to fight crime. Technetic is a corporate tech giant. So since all of these friends work for them, they want to profit off this group. They want to use them to grow their like stake in the city. So they send them out to stop crime and basic things in
But
New
it's
Orleans,
PR.
where it takes place. Right. They want to send them out there, and the problem is the company sees them as this criminal fighting group that's going to make them look really good to everybody. But the premise was like, hey, if I took my best friends and gave them superpowers, what would they do? Well, I mean, it's not exactly what you'd expect. And if you've ever played D&D, you know that nothing goes the way you plan.
Oh yeah.
So they're out there fighting crime, and they find out that there's a rival company that wants to create their own, villains. Essentially, there's another company named Alchemex who it's not that they want to make villains. Their goal is to create similar beings that can be deployed in war and kind of control the war economy by having their own super soldiers. Crit learns of this, and this was a turning point in the story, and I'm going a little bit further, but it's a good plot point. So I gave my players a choice, and that's a big thing with the book and the whole story is everything you see on paper is a choice or a role made by a player. So I said to the guys, like, hey, you learn of this, you could ultimately, become super soldiers of your own, and if you want to go that route, or do you want to stop them? And they collectively decided that having that kind of force in the world was not a good idea, and they decided to take it out. So the first chapter centers around them kind of stopping this, and they learn a lot of the bigger plot and a lot of the bigger story happening behind them as they go. And part of the challenge I gave them was, the choices that they make along the way dictate if they're really heroes or not. And they had to make a choice if they wanted to be heroes, because there's a difference between being a hero, being a vigilante, and just being a guy out there profiting off of their actions.
A breathing gun.
Right. And so it's evolved into a lot more than we anticipated. Like I said, at first it was just a way to have fun. And as I wrote the story out and told people about it, they were like, oh, that's really cool. Because one of the things we touch base on that isn't easily seen in the story is the powers they gain are from an ancient energy that was locked away during Arthurian times. We kind of decided to rewrite the history of King Arthur and use it to as a backdrop for our story and where all of these unlockable superpowers come from.
Well, what is the rest of the world like? Like, is it set in a Gotham City type scenario, or did you pull a Marvel and actually set it in like New York or Boston or Miami?
So it's set in New Orleans and kind of an alternate timeline to what we have in our world. So these companies, after Katrina hit, saw New Orleans as a way to build up, kind of like a new Silicon Valley thing, because it was cheap for them to get started there. The city was destroyed, and they used it as hey, we're going to come in, you give us tons of tax breaks, we'll help rebuild your city, but in turn, we get really cheap manufacturing and rent and taxes. So that was kind of my backdrop for that, was creating because I really wanted to use New Orleans because there's some history and mythology around that city that I wanted to use. So I thought, hey, it would be kind of interesting if we used these companies, and companies never do things out of good for others. It's always like some kind of benefit to them, and that's kind of what I had them do. Technetic, Alchemex, a company called AID, who does robotics, and then there's a Biochem, a biology group, and all four of them went there, and they become these bigger companies in the last 10, 15 years. They've really risen, and we don't know why, but Technetic is this tech supergiant who has their phone, the Technetic One, which has like every feature known to man. They give it away for free, and it's kind of weird because why is this big company giving away this for free? And what we learn is they're collecting data on people and learning a lot about it's a lot of the stuff that we fear now, data collection and what are people really finding out about us. Well, that's what this company's kind of doing, just nobody knows.
Okay. So we've got our obvious heroes. We have quote unquote potential villains, or at least rivals for sure. Like, you've made that that clear that they do have rivals. Without giving anything away, will there be an actual villain like on the field, and not just a villain behind a chair, like in a chair pushing buttons?
Yes, there will be villains. We actually have a very, the Claw from what's that cartoon when I was a kid?
Inspector Gadget.
The guy that had the Inspector Gadget. Thank you. We have kind of a Claw character right now who is behind the scenes that nobody really knows, kind of like pushing things around. So we have that, and then we also introduce in our third issue actual like nemesis, like your rogues gallery comes into play. But I wanted to approach the comic kind of like a Silver Age style, where you see these low-level heroes running around, stopping your generic criminals and your generic kind of story because it's familiar to people. And I didn't want to try and reinvent the wheel. Really just wanted to give some people something they were familiar with at first and focus more on the character development, because the characters are the key part, not these, other villains and the backstories. I wanted people to have time to see the characters for who they were, because these characters that you're reading are my best friends. We use the real names. They play themselves, so they're always putting themselves in these situations. What would I do if this happened? And I didn't want to take away from that at first with these super villains and these big overarching things. I wanted time, at least in the first couple issues, to see the real people with real problems. They're friends, and if you know anything about groups of friends, there's always, the bickering and the banter. And I wanted to use that to get people into them, because the story is centered around them, not the villains. And then as we go, I slowly introduce more and more. So if you remember, like Superman, when he first came out, he didn't fly, he jumped. He was leaping bounds. Iceman was a snowball. Beast was just a big dude. I wanted to take us back to that storytelling aspect, to where we see them go from the guy that jumps to the guy that flies, from the snowball guy to the godlike Iceman that we have now. I wanted people to see the progression, because I was into comic books when in late 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and I tried to pick up a comic book a few years ago, and it was like really challenging, even though I know the backstories for so many characters, and I spent years just diving into these characters, and they're just not the same. And like, I picked up X-Men and was like, why is Apocalypse in this team now? And I read about it, and I'm like, why don't we get new stories? Why aren't we getting new people? We're just getting kind of like rehashes, and we're not getting this development anymore, because these characters are so far developed. It's really hard for, especially like a reader like me, to understand how Wolverine died 3 times and he keeps coming back. Like, why can't we get someone new? And I wanted to give that to people. Like, here are your heroes. They struggle with their own. I mean, they struggle with real decisions. There's points in time where, do we want to kill this guy because he's a really bad guy? He's doing really bad things, or do we turn him over? Or do we let him loose and find the bigger thing that he's connected to? And where it's based on Dungeons and Dragons, these characters level up. So, as the levels progress, their powers get stronger. You get to see them go from, throwing knives and maybe a fireball to literally like blowing. Like, I have a character who's based off of a warlock, and he gets a familiar. He can learn to teleport. His fire blast changes into actual like he has a ring of fire that you can create around him later on. We've got a very strong hero based off of All Might style. And people ask me about the character Boulder. My description is, if Eddie Murphy gained superpowers and acted like the character All Might from My Hero Academia, that's what we'd have.
The funny thing is, I know at least 15 people that would immediately know that. If you give them that description, they would know exactly who that is.
And it's perfect. And it's a natural thing. It's not something that we tried to do. That's just who he is naturally. And he tries to do the right thing all the time. But, you can read the Captain America comics and the Superman comics, and the writers write them to be these really good people all the time. But the fact is, it's hard. It's really hard, no matter what you do in the world, to be a good person all the time. And Boulder, my character, he tries. But the problem is, the people around him have different ideas. So we see him struggle with this idea of being the superhero, to realizing that he needs to focus on him, and he just needs to do what he feels is best all the time, because you can't always make everyone around you make the right decision. And that was a big thing in our story, was seeing him struggle with that. Struggling with the idea that the quintessential superhero is really hard to have, exist, because of the world we live in. And that's my focus. So the villains kind of have a secondary to the characters. They're there to help develop these heroes in the beginning, because I'm an indie writer, I'm an indie creator. I don't have anybody that has a stake in my characters right now. So I felt that if I made all these big overarching things, and these big enemies, and these big things for people that overwhelm people, it might push some readers away. I had a recent review that said the first half of the first book is nothing that you hadn't read before, and it's intentional. I want you to be comfortable with the setting and the characters. It should be familiar, because I'm not trying to reinvent anything. But later on, when we start developing things and people are invested in the characters, that's when I can add the craziness in, and the fun, and the things that really drive my narrative, because you're already invested, you already know the characters. When something happens, I've given a few people some insight on the story, and I'm like, well, this happens. And because they know the character from reading my first book and having a little bit of insight from the live show that I do on my Instagram, they're like, oh, I bet Caliber reacts this way. Well, yeah, you got it. So by having the readers really hone in on the characters and become invested in maybe their favorite character, I think it has more impact later on when I start introducing the supernatural things and the craziness. Then that was my approach. I mean, as a reader, like I said, it's really hard for me just to pick up something and be thrown 50 different things at once and try to digest it all and actually like it.
Very cool indeed. Nowadays it seems like people aren't just thinking about the book. They're looking at other avenues. Has that tap danced into your consciousness at all? Have you pictured maybe a Netflix show 2 years down the road? Is there a mobile game in the works?
Funny you say that. So really what came first was we decided before we did the comic book, I said, hey, we should release our version of the tabletop game because everybody's saying, oh my, now I actually worked in distribution of tabletop games, and I was like, it would be really cool just to finish this out on Kickstarter. It's our 5th edition version of superheroes and Dungeons and Dragons, and it doesn't really fit in the form that we do it. So we were talking about releasing, well, not really talking, we are going to be releasing a tabletop version of this, which takes place after our first season. We decided it would be great for us to build a world first and then give it to our players because, when you play Dungeons and Dragons, you have these different worlds that have existed since, the 60s, 70s when the game was really starting. Wizards of the Coast just create all these things for people to play in. So we figured, hey, let's create this first season of the book and then let people pick up after all these things have come into play. So now we've built a world then. So that'll come out. I think we're going to launch that November, December time, at least in this form. And one of my players and creators is learning right now how to do a 16-bit version of our game. So he wants to do it in old Sega style, like Streets of Rage.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So we shoot for like a PS5 release or what? we look at Steam like
we can sell it, but it would be a free game.
Hey, I mean, all the better. That gets more people interested.
Yeah, I talked to a few of the guys about licensing and things. It's not just about making money, because this is fun for us. We're gonna do it whether people want it or not. We at least want to do it for ourselves. So we're probably gonna release the 16-bit whenever that gets done. That's a project on its own, but that would be a free download, and I might just throw it on the store. If Apple, I know Apple Store is a little bit harder to get stuff on, but throw it on as a mobile game. That way, you read the issue and then you play the game. It'd be really fun for people.
Yeah, that sounds great.
We really want to do an anime, but I would need to find a company that could do that. I don't really want, if I had a choice, I personally would probably want to do like a 90s style X-Men cartoon, just as X-Men and like Wildcats were really fun cartoons back then.
Oh, yeah.
But I know my team would much rather have an anime done in like My Hero Academia style. That's a very common conversation that they have. I just can't do that, so that's not something you're going to see me do. I would have to find someone to help me with that.
Well, I mean, when the very talented fans that are listening to this right now or have popped back to check this out after reading issue 7 and are just amazed at how it all got started, if they opted to do something fan-oriented for you that happened to have an X-Men vibe or even an early G.I. Joe vibe, I'm sure you'd be flattered about that, wouldn't you?
I would be thrilled. I've been on a few live interviews on Instagram, and one thing that blows me away every day is when I wake up and I open my phone and I've got a random, fan art of one of my characters. So if someone would come to me and say, hey, I started working on a cartoon, it looks like G.I. Joe from 1985. What? That's amazing. Let's run with it. Let's make this happen, because that would be awesome to see.
Well, very cool indeed. So, where are all the numerous places people can actually follow this? That way they're up to date and they're not blindsided by this. Like, obviously, you've got your Instagram, and what would that be exactly for those listening?
My Instagram name?
Well, the Instagram to keep up with C.R.I.T.
So it's at Homebrewed Comics, all one word.
Any special spelling or
nope.
Is it straight up Homebrewed Comics?
Yep, homebrewed comics, just like a homebrewed beer. The name comes from Dungeons and Dragons. When you make your own version of the game, it's called a homebrew, and that's where we created our stuff. So Instagram at homebrewed comics.
All right, I'll try to remember to put that link in the description.
Awesome. We have a Facebook. Facebook has a special spelling because a beer company was doing their own funny comics. So I had to use Homebrew Comics, but instead of CS, it's just COMIX.
Okay. Is there a Twitter to follow?
I am not on Twitter. I've heard a few people tell me I need to get on there, but I've never used the platform before. We are working on a YouTube channel and a Twitch stream for when we do because we have our writing sessions are actually playing the game. So we were going to do a Twitch channel for people to follow soon, and give people a chance to kind of live the book as it's being written.
That's pretty cool. I don't think that's ever been done before. You might have just started something new.
It'd be cool. I mean, I'm not trying to invent the wheel, but this is something I've had a few people ask me, why don't other people use a similar storytelling? Because, in our game, we have 5 players. So I don't have to write these characters. I just write the situations that they're in. I give them a situation, and they play it out. And they play it out from their perspective. It's 5 individual perspectives going on, and they're all themselves, so it's really easy. This isn't it's not a very hard story for me to tell. I just had to transcribe what they do into a narrative that people can follow. So that's my job, is just to listen to what's going on and say, oh, well, they're fighting, so this is the scene here, or driving, whatever situation they're in. I have to kind of animate what they're doing. It's a very interesting type of writing. I've had a few other indie writers contact me and say, that's really interesting that's how you write your story, because it's there's no guarantee that what someone wants to happen is going to happen, because they have to roll a die to see if they can actually accomplish what they want to do. There was a situation in one of our games recently where someone wanted to hack a computer that had no skill set to do so. I made them try it, and they failed miserably. So even though the character wanted to use the computer, now we're going to have this funny situation where they're trying to use it, and we realize they don't have any cables to do so. And it creates a really funny narrative when you think, oh, this person should be able to do this. Like, imagine if Superman went to punch somebody, but because the writer didn't roll very well on the punch, he misses. And it's like a detrimental thing, because say he rolled a 1 to do this. Well, a 1 is a critical failure. And in our game, if you do a critical failure, you do something that ends up hurting yourself. So say if, we've had these situations in the game where someone's actually, my warlock character throws knives, and he wound up missing and hitting another character with a knife. So we're going to have a situation in the game where, he's throwing a knife at an enemy, and he misses, and he hits another character, and they're sitting there with a knife in their arm, like, Jesus, dude. So it creates a really funny
the darkness.
Right. And that's something that I wouldn't think of. Like, as a person with these superheroes, you would think, oh, he's going to throw a knife and it's going to be fine, when, the reader's going to see him actually hit his friend with it.
Well, this sounds... I definitely want to keep an eye on this for sure, and if anything, we'll do a follow-up in about 3, maybe 6 months.
Yeah.
But thank you again for coming on, and folks, once again, the Instagram link will be in the description, but Homebrewed Comics, no special spelling, on Instagram. Check them out. And from what I've looked at, he's done almost daily updates. I mean, so far, I'm sure the week's been kind of crazy for you, but Homebrewed Comics on Instagram, and I'm going to assume he's probably going to get a Twitter after this, but thank you for tuning in. Thank you for checking it out. Homebrewed Comics presents C.R.I.T. As always, I'm Ian the Torch Torchetti. My respected guest at this time, if you would again.
My name is Christopher Michael from Homebrewed Comics. Thank you.
and thank you for sitting in the hot seat with us.
Appreciate it.